Welcome to the second module on zebra and quagga mussel and other A.N.S. biology. We will review the top species of concern in Colorado, including the most recent information on A.N.S. detections in the state. We will focus on species which have been detected in Colorado: zebra and quagga mussel, Asian clam, waterflea, New Zealand mudsnail, rusty crayfish, and Eurasian watermilfoil. Fortunately, the watercraft inspection and decontamination protocols in place for zebra and quagga mussels will also help prevent the spread of other A.N.S. Remember, no mud, no plants, no water, no animals on boats, no exceptions. It is important for inspectors to learn the basic biology of invasive species so that they can understand the science-based approach to prevention, containment, and monitoring in Colorado. This knowledge also helps educating visitors and boaters. Let's begin with species that are of greatest concern: zebra and quagga mussels. As you'll remember, they have three life stages: veligers, settlers, and adults. Veligers are microscopic and can be transported in standing water. Settlers are a juvenile life stage and appear as sand or bumps on boats and don't rub off easily. Adults are about the size of your thumbnail, have two shells, and have Byssal threads for attachments to hard surfaces. There are three main characteristics that make zebra and quagga mussels invasive. First, they reproduce at enormous rates. Second, they attach to hard surfaces with Byssal threads. Third, they filter feed and deplete the base of the food chain. Let's review each one of these invasive traits. Zebra and quagga mussels reproduce very rapidly. A single female mussel can produce up to 1 million eggs per year. If only 10% of these survive, there would still be 10 septillion mussels in that water body after 5 years. In Lake Mead and the lower Colorado River, quagga mussels are reproducing every month. A fully reproducing population can quickly cover the bottom of an infested water body, displacing native species, damaging equipment, harming infrastructure, stopping the flow of water, and ultimately making it difficult for boating and all water-based recreation to occur. An invasion would devastate Colorado's recreation, wildlife, and water delivery systems for municipal, agricultural, and industrial use. Byssal threads are a major contributor to the harm that a zebra or quagga mussel invasion could cause. These spider-like threads are made up of proteins that are secreted from a gland and allow zebra and quagga mussels to hitchhike over land on boats and trailers, attach to and smother native organisms, damage equipment and boats, and impede the flow of water to homes, farms, and power plants by clogging pipes. The third characteristic of zebra and quagga mussels that makes them detrimental to aquatic systems is their filter feeding capacity. One adult mussel can filter 1 liter of water per day, or about the volume of a standard drinking water bottle. This efficient filter feeding selectively removes plankton and algae from the base of the food chain, and over a short period of time can cause the collapse of important recreational and native fisheries. Water quality is also impacted by zebra and quagga mussels by the elimination of waste as well as the selective ingestion of algae, which leaves behind species which degrade water quality and aquatic systems. Most lakes and reservoirs in Colorado have just enough nutrients and algae to make them outstanding fisheries, but the introduction of zebra or quagga mussels could provide very different habitat for fish. Their ability to filter feed rapidly removes plankton and nutrients from the water column. This gives the appearance of clearer water. This ultimately allows sunlight to penetrate the water column, allowing for growth of rooted aquatic plants and nuisance algae in lakes and reservoirs where none existed before. Once there are dense weed mats, algae blooms that cause taste and odor problems in drinking water can occur. Those dense plants and algae mats could also provide excellent mosquito habitat, furthering another invasive species impacting human health: West Nile virus. Clear water can also shift fish populations in favor of predators that rely on sight and alter fishing destinations in the process. For example, largemouth bass will avoid clear water and sunlight and will move into deeper water, making them especially hard for anglers to catch. Management of zebra and quagga invasions is very difficult and expensive. Although there has been some success controlling mussels in closed pipe systems, eradication in open water such as western reservoirs and rivers is impossible. Infestations of Lake Mead, Lake Powell, and other lower Colorado River water bodies is becoming an economic and ecological tragedy. Prevention is the best and most cost-effective choice, and education is the most important part of prevention. Boaters who understand and accept that a cleaned, drained, and dried boat generally reduce the likelihood of zebra and quagga mussels being introduced to Colorado and take action to clean, drain, and dry their own watercraft each and every time they boat are helping to protect the lakes and reservoirs that they love. This is a recent map of mussel populations in the United States. You'll notice that all locations in Colorado with prior detections are now delisted following 5 years of negative results. This is thanks to the mandatory WID and education programs in place. The only pathway of introduction into Colorado is on trailered watercraft. There are no mussels upstream of Colorado. We are a headwater state. Now that we've learned why we don't want mussels in Colorado reservoirs, where do you think they are most likely to be found on a boat or trailer? They can be found in moist or wet places, rough areas, right angles, dark or shaded places, below the waterline, and in compartments that could hold water. There are no water bodies positive for zebra and quagga mussels in Colorado as of 2017. The Parks and Wildlife Commission delisted Pueblo Reservoir on January 11, 2017. Pueblo is now listed as negative following 5 years of negative sampling results. Colorado is now completely free of zebra and quagga mussels, and we intend to keep it that way. Colorado is the first and only state in the nation to go from positive to negative status. This is due to the mandatory inspection and decontamination program and the tireless efforts of inspections and managers. Remember, as a headwater state with no invasive mussels upstream, the only way mussels can invade Colorado waters is by a boat. Next, we will talk about a mussel species in Colorado that is commonly mistaken for zebra and quagga mussels by both customers and professionals alike, the Asian clam or corbicula. There are a couple of characteristics that can help you tell them apart from zebra or quagga mussels. 1. Asian clams do not have byssal threads and cannot attach to substrates like zebra and quagga mussels. 2. They have very deep ridges in their shell that can be felt by running your fingernail across. 3. They do not have stripes like zebra and quagga mussels. The striped appearance in this picture is due to sun bleaching the shell's ridges. In this photograph from the shoreline of Lake Mead, you can see the difference in size and shape between the quagga mussels and Asian clams. Like zebra or quagga mussels, Asian clams are small bivalve mollusks that are not native to Colorado. They were first found in the South Platte River drainage in 1993 and are now known to the Arkansas, Colorado, Gunnison, San Juan, and South Platte River basins. They can be transported in water, and juveniles can be transported in mud. While they are somewhat widespread in Colorado, it is important to prevent their spread to new water bodies. The inspection protocol will prevent the spread of Asian clams in Colorado. Adult Asian clams have an oval shell that is deep on the hinged side. They can grow up to 65 millimeters in length. However, the average size is about 25 millimeters. The shell has well-defined thick growth rings that feel like ridges or steps on the shell. Older organisms are dark in color, but all vary in some shade of brown. Scientific literature says they prefer fast-moving water, but they are commonly found in lakes and reservoirs in Colorado. They can be moved around as bait or cultivated by food in Asian markets. They are also sold in aquarium trade, falsely labeled as pygmy clams or golden clams. They are prolific reproducers, and huge population numbers can clog intakes for water canals, power plants, and irrigation. They outcompete native bivalves for food and space, disrupting the aquatic food web. Now let's focus on the animal species listed in Colorado A.N.S regulations. We will spend time today on two other species known to be in Colorado, New Zealand mudsnails and rusty crayfish. Note that there are no fish or pathogens on the list because they are well documented, managed, and regulated in the existing fish health regulations, and there is no need to duplicate them in A.N.S regulations, which are focused on species that are easily transported on watercraft and gear. New Zealand mudsnails were first discovered in Colorado in 2004. These freshwater aquatic snails are native to New Zealand and were first discovered in North America in the 1980s in the Snake River in Idaho and the Madison River in Montana. New Zealand mudsnails in North America are all females and reproduce by cloning. They can withstand large fluctuations in temperature and survive through winter by burrowing in mud and riparian roots. These tiny snails are spread very easily as they are well hidden in mud on conveyances or waders, boots, and gear. CPW urges anglers not to use felt sole waders to help prevent the spread of mudsnails. They have an operculum, or protective membrane, which they can close to remain protected in damp conditions for 30 to 50 days. This allows them to pass through to the digestive system of fish unharmed. While there is a native snail that looks similar to the New Zealand mudsnail, there are some basic features that help to identify it. It is very small, ranging in size from a grain of sand to 1/8 of an inch in length. They are dark brown to black in color and have 5 to 6 spirals on their shell. When the tip is pointing upwards, the opening of the shell faces right. Most native snails open to the left. New Zealand mudsnails can survive in freshwater, brackish, and saline waters, although they do not produce very well in saline waters. New Zealand mudsnails can be introduced by anglers on boots, waders, gear, boats, tires, trailer, or even mud stuck on a dog's paws. They can also be transported from one location to another by wildlife, fish, and plant movement. Like all invasive species, New Zealand mudsnails outcompete native species for space and food and reduce the availability of prey for fish. They are not a quality food source for fish because they can close their shell and pass through the digestive system of a fish unharmed. This increases the distribution of mudsnails and results in smaller fish due to the lack of nutrients. This is the list of where mudsnails have been found in Colorado. We had a very aggressive angler education campaign in 2004 to encourage anglers to clean gear, primarily boots and waders, to prevent further spread. In 2008 and 2009, the program turned its education efforts to boaters to reduce the risk of zebra and quagga mussels. As a result, mudsnail populations began expanding throughout the state. Colorado has re-engaged with the angling community to encourage clean angling and good stewardship practices to prevent further spread of mudsnails. There are 2 new detections of New Zealand mudsnails in recent years. In 2015, New Zealand mudsnails were discovered at the inlet to Chatfield Reservoir, and in 2016, a new population was identified in the Gunnison River west of Delta. Again, education of anglers is key to reducing risk of new populations of New Zealand mudsnail in Colorado. Rusty crayfish are native to the Ohio River Basin, but were initially discovered outside of their native range in the 1960s. This aggressive species has devastating ecological impacts in the northeastern U.S. Although this species is native to the United States, it is not native to Colorado. Colorado has 6 species of crayfish native to the eastern half of the state. However, they are not native west of the Continental Divide. In fact, there are no native crayfish west of the Continental Divide. Identification of rusty crayfish in the field is extremely difficult and requires input from professional taxonomists. Rusty crayfish grow up to 5 inches in length and have brown bodies. Some characteristics of rusty crayfish, which may or may not be visible, are 2 rusty patches on either side of the abdomen, an oval gap in the claw, and black bands on the tip of the claws. Definitive identification of this species must be from a reproducing male specimen and confirmed by at least 2 experts per regulation. Suspected rusty crayfish should be reported to the A.N.S. program immediately and collected and shipped to the A.N.S. laboratory for verification. Rusty crayfish will colonize freshwater lakes, rivers, and streams. They prefer deep pools with fast currents as cover from predators. These crayfish were introduced into Colorado through illegal stocking and bait movement. Rusty crayfish are voracious eaters and will prey upon small fish, insects, and fish eggs. They will also eat aquatic vegetation and disrupt plant communities as a result. This disrupts the food chain by reducing the available resources for wildlife and cover for prey fish. They are extremely aggressive and will fight off fish, making them poor food resources themselves. They have a thick exoskeleton, making them difficult for predators to digest. It is reported that popular recreational swimming holes in Wisconsin and Minnesota have been ruined because these aggressive crayfish will attack and pinch swimmers. Rusty crayfish have been identified in Catamount Reservoir, the Yampa River south of Steamboat Springs, and Stagecoach Reservoir in Routt County. They have also been found in Sanchez Reservoir in Costilla County in southern Colorado. CPW has an active control program by mechanically removing rusty crayfish in an attempt to mitigate impacts to fish populations and the public. There are no native crayfish to Colorado west of the Continental Divide, and it is against the law to move live crayfish anywhere west of the Continental Divide. The head of a crayfish must be separated from the thorax upon removal from the water body. This regulation also applies to Sanchez Reservoir State Wildlife Area. In January of 2017, the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission delisted Daphnia lumholtzi from both the Parks Chapter 8 A.N.S. regulations and the Wildlife Chapter 0 prohibited aquatic species list. This means that waters previously listed as other A.N.S. positive, based solely on this species, are now considered prevention or negative waters. Pueblo hatchery is once again a negative hatchery for all A.N.S. We will no longer implement other A.N.S. containment procedures for the Daphnia lumholtzi. Eurasian watermilfoil is the highest priority aquatic noxious weed in Colorado. This plant is native to Europe, Asia, and northern Africa. It was most likely introduced through the nursery trade in the 1940s, but possibly as early as the 1880s. This is a highly aggressive species that can survive in a variety of habitats and grows an average of 1 foot per week. These dense mats crowd out native species, disrupt the food chain, and displace native wildlife. It also impedes water recreation such as boating, swimming, and fishing. Eurasian watermilfoil is a submerged rooted perennial plant. It has long, branching underwater stems with feather leaves in whorls of 4 or 5. Leaves are in pairs of 12 to 20 that are closely spaced. The leaves are about 1/2 inch in length with a blunt tip. The plant has no structure and will collapse out of water. Eurasian watermilfoil can colonize a wide variety of habitats including rivers, creeks, ditches, reservoirs, lakes, and ponds, and can grow in shallow or deep water. Eurasian watermilfoil reproduces most successfully by fragmentation. Small fragments break off and drift downstream or to another part of the water body and begin a new population. Humans spread this plant accidentally by transporting plant fragments, and by engaging activities that help break plants apart and create fragments. Less than 2 centimeters of a plant fragment can form a new infestation. Here are some pictures of Eurasian watermilfoil infestations. Eurasian watermilfoil is not widespread in Colorado. Most locations are on the Front Range from Fort Collins to Pueblo. The only 2 locations on the west slope are in the Rio Grande and Navajo Reservoir in the southwest. The majority of the west slope and eastern plains are free of this invader for now. However, if you go back a few years and compare today's distribution with that from 2012, you can see that Eurasian watermilfoil is continuing to spread to new locations across the Front Range. New locations in the past few years include major water bodies such as Chatfield, Cherry Creek, and Pueblo. As a result, Eurasian watermilfoil and its aggressive hybrid continues to be a concern for water and recreation managers in the state. In January, the Parks and Wildlife Commission passed new regulations that require the boat operator to remove vegetation from the boat, trailer, and all associated equipment upon exit from the reservoir. It is now illegal to drive a conveyance over land with vegetation attached. The same is true of a water drain plug. Inspectors will have to educate boaters about these new regulations, and officers are expected to enforce the regulation. This is a list of watercraft inspection and decontamination stations with known A.N.S. populations. With the delisting of Pueblo Reservoir for quagga mussels and the delisting of Daphnia lumholtzi in January 2017, the list of WIDs positive for A.N.S. has been greatly reduced. As we are now free of zebra and quagga mussels, all of these waters are classified as other A.N.S. waters for the 2017 season. Here is a map of all known A.N.S. in Colorado. As you can see, much of the state is still free of aquatic nuisance species, and your hard work will keep it that way for future generations. This concludes Module 2 on Biology. Please take the Module 2 quiz and proceed to Module 3.